Hey guys, welcome to the population dynamics video. So this is going to go over essentially what we learned in our Oh Dear lab today. And the first thing that I wanted to review with you are the two terms biotic and abiotic. You probably learned these in middle school, but let's review one quick moment. Bio means life, and A means not. So biotic factors are the living factors of an ecosystem, and abiotic factors are the non-living aspects of an ecosystem. So when we're talking about the otter activity that we did, and the kelp forest ecosystem, what do you think some biotic and abiotic factors are? Try to go beyond just listing living and non-living things and focus on interactions. So biotic factors would be, how do these organisms interact? Abiotic factors could be, what are some aspects of the environment that's not alive or non-living that's going to affect the living organisms? I want you to list 2 biotic and 2 abiotic factors on your homework. Answer these on your Google assignment. It's going to be a Google form, so you can jot these down quickly and then copy them over into your assignment, or you can pause the video and go answer those now. So think of 2 biotic and 2 abiotic factors from that kelp forest ecosystem that we talked about. So going back to our Oh Dear lab, we graphed the population of the deer and the population of the wolves, or the predators. So let's talk about how we read these population graphs. When you have more organisms in a population being born than dying, more births than deaths, we're going to have a population increase, a growth, like this first period here on the left. When you have more deaths than births, you're going to be in a population decline or decrease. Now, a sudden large increase in the death rate, where you have a massive die-off of a lot of your population, is called a crash, and we have one right here, second from the left. This could be the result of a flood, or a drought, or a famine, or some type of natural disaster, something where the amount of resources are being affected so drastically that organisms can't survive. So in your Oh Dear activity, when all of the resources were speaking to each other and they said, hey, let's all be water, or let's all be food, and there was no shelter and none of whatever the other factor or resource was, you had lots of deer all of a sudden die off, because if the deer needed food and all that was available was water, they starved and they died. Now, when you have about equal birth and death rates, we have what we call a stable population. The population is going to be hovering around one set point. Now, your second question for your homework, I want you to take a look at these 2 graphs and answer the following questions. First, with the graph on the left, what is happening that's allowing this population to grow exponentially, to grow out of control? And the second question is, what is happening in this graph on the right that's forcing the population to level off? Why is this red dot seeming to be the height of where the population can go? Now, sorry for that noise. I have somebody outside cleaning my yard. So, S-curves. These are special cases where we have limited resources. So in the case of Oh Dear, there was only a certain number of resources that were available to the deer. If there was fewer resources than deer, deer would die. So in this case, you'll see a period of growth until we hit either a crash or a small decline, and then we'll have stability. And the stability will be around something called the carrying capacity. And this is the maximum size the population can get in that particular area, in that habitat. And that's because of something called limiting factors. Eventually, your population is going to get so big that the environment can't sustain it. There's not going to be enough water, there's not going to be enough food, there's not going to be enough space or sunlight for your population to continue growing. So it's going to stabilize around its carrying capacity. You can say that in the city of Ashland, the carrying capacity for oak trees is 3,000 oak trees, because otherwise there won't be enough space or sunlight. The second type of curve is what we call a J curve. This is where you see exponential growth, or growth that's out of control. And this is because this particular population currently has unlimited resources. An example of that would be bacteria. Often, bacteria have so many resources where they live that they can grow out of control. Another example is the human population. So your third question is going to be to look at these two graphs of the human population. And I want you to think of 2 reasons why our population might have started growing out of control around 1950. So your question is, what are 2 reasons why the human population is growing exponentially? And then a third question that I want you to answer after that is, how is this going to be a problem in the future? Why is exponential growth going to become a problem for humans? So just to review these 2 graphs, on the left we have our J curve, and this is where our population is growing out of control because at this point they have unlimited resources. The one on the right is our S curve, where it grows and then levels off at the carrying capacity because there's limited resources in its environment. Now, another graph that we can look at when talking about population is predator-prey relationships. So predator-prey is where one species targets another species as its food source. So like a lynx and a rabbit, or a wolf and a deer. The predator is the eater, the prey is the thing being eaten. So take a look at this graph here, and we're going to talk about this when I see you next. Be able to answer questions about this, like, what is the overall trend? As the prey population goes up, what happens to the predator population? As the predator population goes up, what happens to the prey? Also, I want you to think about this area right here, 1905. This is where we see the lynx drop to a very, very low population, about 5,000 individuals. And I want you to look at the graph and think, why did the population drop so low at this point? This isn't a question you have to answer for the homework, but it's one that I want you to think about, and we're going to talk about when I see you in class next. So when we're looking at predator-prey graphs, they don't always look pretty like the graph on the right. It's not necessarily as one goes up, the other goes up, and vice versa. It often looks more like this graph on the left with the moose and the wolves. It's going to be jagged. There's going to be a lot of crashing, a lot of growth, a lot of exponential growth, then crashing. It's going to be in a constant state of flux. And this goes back to the question that you answered in class last time. Nature is never really fully in balance. There's too many factors that are interfering with our population numbers that our populations are constantly changing. Even if they're growing, we may have a year where they're growing more slowly or where we do crash a little bit and then bounce back. So nature is constantly changing. And the last thing we're going to talk about are, aside from predator and prey relationships, what are some ways that species interact with other species? There's a few major ones here. The first is symbiosis, and symbiosis is when you have multiple organisms sharing the same habitat and essentially living together. There's 3 different types. There's mutualism, where 2 organisms benefit each other. There's commensalism, where in the relationship between 2 organisms, one benefits and the other is kind of neutral. It's not harmed, but it's not helped. And then you have parasitism. This is where one organism is benefited and the other is harmed or hurt. Predation is the predator-prey relationship. And then you have competition, where it could be even within the same species. Humans compete over resources. The deer were competing over the resources. The predator were competing over the resource of the deer. So it's where you have either the same species or other species competing over the same resource. Now, the first one here is mutualism. 2 examples are the rhino and the plover bird. So rhinos often get covered in parasites, and the plover bird will actually come and eat the parasites off of the rhino. Now, this is where both are benefiting. The plover gets a nice snack, and the rhino actually gets relief from the parasites that are bothering it. And the bottom one is of the clownfish. It can live in sea anemones that normally sting other fish. The clownfish gets protection from the sea anemone, from other fish that might want to come eat it, And the clownfish makes sure that the sea anemone stays healthy. It cleans it, and they're both benefiting. These other two examples are examples of commensalism. This is where one is benefited and the other isn't really hurt. So the top picture is of a whale flipper with barnacles on it. Barnacles are another small species of like filter feeder. And in this case, the barnacles get a really nice place to live that travels all around and gets exposed to many different types of food sources. But the whale, he's not really being helped by the barnacles being there, and he's not being hurt by them being there either. So he's neutral. And in the bottom example, when cattle graze, they rip up grass and they stomp on the ground, and a lot of the bugs in the soil come up to the top. This benefits birds because birds will follow around and eat up the bugs as they get pulled to the surface. The cow doesn't really care that the birds are there. The birds are getting the benefit of having the bugs being drawn up to the surface, but the cattle, they don't care. The birds could be there or not, they're still just going to sit and eat the grass. And the last examples are parasitism. This is, the top one is actually a picture of a specific type of caterpillar that a wasp lays eggs on this caterpillar. And as the eggs hatch, the wasps will actually eat the caterpillar as their first food source. So the wasps are getting a benefit of a place to lay their eggs and a food source for the babies, but the caterpillar is harmed. It's actually killed in the end. The bottom example is of the cuckoo bird. This bird will lay its egg in a different species of nest. And when the cuckoo bird hatches, it's usually bigger, and it hatches earlier than all the other baby birds. So it'll actually take the other babies and push them out of the nest. It's going to benefit because it's going to get all the food from these parents who aren't his, but the other babies are going to be harmed because they're either going to be bullied, starved, or actually thrown out of the nest by the cuckoo bird. So that's all I have for you guys today. Make sure you go back and answer the questions on the Google form. And if you have any other questions, make sure you write them down and bring them for class next time.